Welcome back to Breaking U.S. Immigration News. Today, we're covering a deeply troubling issue that doesn't get nearly enough attention in our national conversation about immigration. We're talking about American citizens, people born and raised in the United States, who have faced violent encounters simply because someone assumed they didn't belong here. These are stories that need to be heard, experiences that demand our attention, and a reality that far too many Americans face every single day. Before we dive into these personal accounts, let's establish something fundamental. Being an American citizen means you have the legal right to be in this country. It means you're protected by the Constitution. It means you belong here, period. Yet for many Americans, particularly those from immigrant backgrounds or those who don't fit someone's narrow definition of what an American looks like, this basic truth is challenged in ways that range from uncomfortable to downright dangerous. The phrase, "I'm a citizen," shouldn't have to be a defensive statement. It shouldn't have to be shouted during a confrontation or whispered fearfully to prove your right to exist in your own country. But for thousands of Americans, these words have become a necessary shield, a verbal passport they must present at a moment's notice to strangers who have appointed themselves as unauthorized immigration enforcers. Maria Rodriguez grew up in El Paso, Texas. Her family has been in the region for 5 generations, long before the border was even drawn where it is today. She's a third-grade teacher, a registered voter, and someone who has never lived anywhere but the United States. Last year, Maria was leaving a grocery store when a man approached her aggressively in the parking lot, demanding to know her immigration status. When she tried to walk away, he grabbed her cart and physically blocked her path to her car. Maria told him repeatedly that she was a citizen, that this was none of his business, but he continued to follow her, shouting that people like her were ruining the country. She finally had to call the police, shaking and terrified in broad daylight, in her own neighborhood for the crime of grocery shopping while Latina. Stories like Maria's are not isolated incidents. They represent a disturbing pattern that has escalated significantly over the past several years. According to reports from civil rights organizations, incidents of citizens being accosted, harassed, or even physically attacked based on perceived immigration status have increased dramatically. These aren't just uncomfortable conversations or rude comments. We're talking about physical violence, threats, and confrontations that leave lasting psychological trauma. James Chen is a software engineer in Seattle. His grandparents came to the United States from China in the 1950s. James was born in Portland, Oregon, and has never lived anywhere else. During the pandemic, James was jogging in his neighborhood when someone in a pickup truck deliberately swerved toward him, screaming racial slurs and telling him to go back to China and take his virus with him. The truck clipped James, sending him tumbling to the pavement with serious injuries, including a broken wrist and severe road rash. When police arrived, James's first words, even before describing his injuries, were, "I'm a citizen." He felt he had to establish his right to be jogging in his own neighborhood, on streets he'd run since high school, before he could even seek help for his injuries. What drives people to commit these acts of violence? The answer is complex, but it often stems from a toxic combination of xenophobia, misinformation about immigration, and a sense of self-appointed authority. Some perpetrators genuinely believe they're protecting their country or their community. They've consumed so much inflammatory rhetoric about immigration invasions and border crises that they see every person with brown skin or an accent as a potential threat. Others are simply expressing deep-seated racism under the cover of immigration concerns, and some are emboldened by a political climate where attacking immigrants, or people perceived to be immigrants, has been normalized and even encouraged by certain public figures. The legal implications of these attacks are significant. Assaulting someone based on their perceived national origin or immigration status is a hate crime in many jurisdictions. It violates federal civil rights laws, but prosecution rates for these crimes remain disappointingly low. Many victims don't report these incidents because they fear retaliation, don't trust law enforcement, or simply don't believe anything will be done. Even when cases are reported, they often don't result in serious charges or convictions. Fatima Hassan knows this reality all too well. Fatima is a nursing student in Phoenix, Arizona. She was born in Minneapolis to Somali immigrant parents who became naturalized citizens when she was 5 years old. Last summer, Fatima was studying at a coffee shop when another customer began harassing her about her hijab, insisting she was breaking American law by wearing it and demanding she remove it immediately. When Fatima calmly explained that she was an American citizen with every right to wear her religious attire, the woman threw hot coffee in her face, causing second-degree burns. Fatima required emergency medical treatment and still has visible scarring. The attacker was charged with assault, but the hate crime enhancement was dropped as part of a plea deal, and she served just 90 days in jail. These violent encounters don't just cause physical harm. The psychological impact can be profound and long-lasting. Victims often develop anxiety, hypervigilance, and symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. They begin to view their own communities as hostile territory. Simple activities like going to the store, taking a walk, or sitting in a public space become sources of stress and fear. Many victims report changing their behavior, avoiding certain areas, or even altering their appearance to seem less foreign or more American, whatever that means. Dr. Samuel Okafor is a pediatrician in Atlanta, Georgia. He came to the United States from Nigeria as a child when his parents won the diversity visa lottery. He became a citizen at 18, went to college and medical school in the United States, and has dedicated his career to serving underserved communities. 2 years ago, Dr. Okafor was confronted by a patient's family member who refused to let him treat the child, insisting they wanted a real American doctor. When Dr. Okafor explained that he was indeed American and highly qualified, the family member became physically aggressive, pushing him and threatening him. Hospital security had to intervene. Dr. Okafor says the incident made him question everything. He'd spent years proving himself, earning degrees, serving his community, but to some people none of that mattered because of the color of his skin and his accent. It's important to understand that citizenship itself doesn't protect you from these attacks. The attackers don't stop to verify immigration status before they strike. They make assumptions based on appearance, language, religion, or ethnicity. This means that American citizens of Asian, Latino, Middle Eastern, African, and South Asian descent face these risks disproportionately, regardless of how many generations their families have been in the United States. The show me your papers mentality has created an environment where American citizens are regularly expected to prove their belonging. Some carry their passports or citizenship certificates, documents that most Americans never think about on a daily basis. Others keep photos of themselves in military uniform or graduation pictures from American universities on their phones, ready to present evidence of their American credentials to hostile strangers. This is not how citizenship is supposed to work in a free society. Think about that for a moment. Imagine having to carry proof of your citizenship just to go about your daily life. Imagine the mental burden of constantly wondering if today will be the day someone confronts you. Imagine explaining to your children that even though they were born here, even though this is their country, they might have to defend their right to be here. This is a reality that millions of Americans live with every single day, and it's a reality that most Americans never have to consider. The economic impact of these attacks also deserves attention. Victims often miss work due to physical injuries or psychological trauma. Some change jobs or careers because they no longer feel safe in certain environments. Medical bills from injuries sustained in attacks can be substantial. Legal fees from pursuing justice can be overwhelming. And the broader economic impact on communities where these attacks occur includes decreased business activity as people avoid certain areas, property value impacts, and the costs of increased security measures. Roberto Morales served 2 tours in Afghanistan with the United States Marine Corps. He was born in San Diego, California, the son of Mexican immigrants who became citizens decades ago. After returning home from military service, Roberto was working construction when immigration enforcement officers conducting a workplace raid demanded his identification. Despite showing his driver's license and explaining his military service, Roberto was detained for several hours. During the detention, other workers who assumed he was undocumented taunted him and even physically shoved him. Roberto kept repeating, "I'm a citizen, I served this country," but it made no difference in that moment. The psychological impact of being treated as an illegal immigrant in the country he'd literally fought for was devastating. Children are not immune to these attacks either. School-age American citizens have been bullied, harassed, and even physically assaulted by classmates who've absorbed anti-immigrant rhetoric from adults. Teachers report incidents where students tell classmates they're going to be deported, even when those children are American citizens. In some cases, children have been followed home from school by adults who harass their families based on perceived immigration status. Priya Patel was born in New Jersey. Her parents immigrated from India before she was born. At 12 years old, Priya was walking home from school when a group of teenagers surrounded her, demanding to see her green card and threatening to call immigration on her family. They pushed her to the ground and stole her backpack. Priya was terrified to tell her parents because she didn't want them to worry, but the experience changed how she saw her place in her own community. She became quiet and withdrawn, afraid to draw attention to herself. The ripple effects of these violent encounters extend far beyond the immediate victims. Entire communities live with heightened fear and anxiety. Families have conversations about how to respond if someone questions their right to be in the country. Parents coach their children on what to say if they're confronted. Community organizations provide Know Your Rights trainings that include how to de-escalate violent encounters. This is the reality for millions of American citizens who happen to look or sound different from the assumed American norm. Legal experts point out that these attacks violate fundamental constitutional principles. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, which includes random demands for identification or papers from private citizens acting as vigilantes. The 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection under the law, meaning you can't be treated differently based on your race or national origin. But constitutional protections only matter if they're enforced, and too often, victims of these attacks find little recourse through the legal system. Community advocates are calling for better training for law enforcement on how to handle reports of these incidents. They're pushing for stronger hate crime laws with real penalties. They're demanding that political leaders tone down inflammatory rhetoric about immigration that creates the environment where these attacks happen. And they're working to build support networks for victims who often feel isolated and blamed for what happened to them. The irony is painful. Many of the citizens who face these attacks come from immigrant families who believed deeply in the American dream. They followed the rules, became citizens through legal processes, contributed to their communities, and raised children who see themselves as fully American. Yet they find themselves defending their very presence in the country that is legally and rightfully theirs. It's also worth noting that these attacks sometimes come from other immigrants or children of immigrants who have adopted harsh, anti-immigrant views, perhaps as a way of distinguishing themselves or proving their own belonging. This internalized prejudice adds another layer of complexity and pain to these encounters. What can be done to address this crisis? First, we need national leadership that unequivocally condemns violence against anyone based on perceived immigration status. We need clear messaging that vigilante immigration enforcement is illegal and will be prosecuted. We need law enforcement agencies to take these attacks seriously and prioritize investigating and prosecuting them as the hate crimes they often are. We need educational initiatives that help people understand that American identity is not defined by what someone looks like or what language their grandparents spoke. We need media representation that reflects the true diversity of American citizenship. And we need community dialogues that allow people to confront their prejudices and learn from those who've been harmed by them. For victims of these attacks, resources are available, though they're often difficult to access. Civil rights organizations like the ACLU, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and local immigrant rights groups can provide legal assistance and support. Many communities have hate crime hotlines where incidents can be reported. Therapy and counseling services that specialize in trauma can help victims process their experiences and begin to heal. The American citizens who've survived these violent encounters carry more than physical scars. They carry the knowledge that their citizenship, their belonging, their very right to exist peacefully in their own country can be challenged at any moment. They live with a vigilance that other Americans never have to consider. And they often feel invisible in national conversations about immigration, which focus on undocumented immigrants and border security while ignoring the violence inflicted on legal American citizens. As we close today's discussion, remember these stories the next time you hear someone talk about immigration. Remember that real people are being hurt, American citizens are living in fear, and violence is being committed in the name of immigration enforcement. These aren't abstract policy debates. These are our neighbors, our colleagues, our fellow Americans, people who deserve to live without fear in the only country they've ever called home. If you or someone you know has experienced violence related to perceived immigration status, please seek help. Document everything, report to law enforcement, contact civil rights organizations, and don't suffer in silence. Your citizenship is real, your rights matter, and you deserve protection under the law. Thank you for watching Breaking U.S. Immigration News. If this video opened your eyes to an issue you hadn't fully considered before, please share it. These stories need to be heard, these voices need to be amplified, and this violence needs to end. Until next time, stay informed, stay safe, and stand up for the rights of all Americans.